I'm Todd Hagemoo. I'm the Agriculture Extension Agent and Director of Routt County Extension for Colorado State University here in Steamboat Springs. So as an extension agent, how we use the river is much like the community, but what we do more is educate about the river and try to educate people as to why it's so important that we not only manage it from a quality standpoint, but from a quantity standpoint. Because, of course, in working in agriculture and with agriculture producers across northwest Colorado, the river is our lifeblood. It's what provides the water for our stock. It's what provides the water to grow the hay that we feed the stock all winter. It's the lifeblood of the Yampa Valley and of our ranching and agricultural traditions here. We can produce any number of crops on dry land, but of course, irrigated meadows are where it's really at. And if we can get 2.5 to 3 tons per acre production in with our hay, that makes it exceptionally valuable and makes our lands very productive. Agriculture can impact river health in several different ways, both personally and then through the people I work with in Extension. A couple different things. Of course, we own so much of the riparian habitat along the river. So taking care of that riparian habitat, making sure it's not overgrazed, making sure that the flora that exists there naturally, trees, cottonwoods, willows, things of that nature, also the grasses and the understory, making sure that those are managed appropriately so that there is a buffer and filtration system for runoff is exceptionally important, how we can control river health. And also the practices that we use in feeding our animals, making sure that we don't allow animals too much access to the river, limiting that so we don't get fecal matter and feces in the river. Weed spraying activities, of course, controlling noxious weeds is very important for the environment, but how we control those chemicals and use those in relation to the river to make sure those don't get into the river are very important. Same with fertilizers. We certainly educate our ranchers, and they're very good at making sure that fertilizers aren't over-applied because we don't want that extra nitrogen or the limited amounts of phosphorus that we use to go into the river, so we can help keep that river safe and healthy for everyone's enjoyment.
So my name is Kelly Romero Heaney, and I am the Water Resources Manager for the City of Steamboat Springs. Part of my job, I'm in charge of overseeing stormwater and pollution runoff from our community, and then I also am in charge of overseeing the Healthy Yampa River program and long-term water supply planning for the City of Steamboat. All right, so your question is, why does the river need to be managed? And I think that the question should really be, what needs to be managed to protect the river? And it's really that people need to be managed. The river can manage itself, especially if you give it the space that it needs. If you have the riparian corridor conserved and conservation easements, if you provide a good buffer from its channel, so you can protect the riparian area, the river plants, the trees, the willows, the cottonwoods, the alders, and you give it space to move, then the river will manage itself. But in urban communities like the City of Steamboat Springs, unfortunately, we have a railroad in the way, and we have downtown in the way, so there are some things that we have to do just to try to optimize the quality of the river and the ecosystem services that it provides within our community. We consume the water from the river for drinking water, for agriculture, for industrial use, for recreational use, for snowmaking. And I think it's fine until we consume too much water out of the river and there's not enough left for the aquatic life. But people also can conserve and be mindful of how much they're taking. And so we can mitigate the threat and risk that human beings will impact the river.
I'm Kent Vertrees. I'm the president of the Friends of the Yampa. I've been in Steamboat for 25 years, and the river's my heart and soul. I care about the river because it's my heart and soul. This is where I get my peace and quiet, and my spirituality comes from the river. I'm raising my children with the river as a main recreational resource. I love the river for its intrinsic values, for of course what it provides us as human beings, but also that spiritual sense that I get from recreating on the river, from being near the river, from all the the habitats and the wildlife that are in the river. I believe we should protect the river health through keeping water in the river. If we dewater the river to the point where the big peak flows can't flow down the river, then the endangered fish will be impacted. The endangered habitats will be impacted. The endangered recreation will be impacted. And of course, protecting flows also when the river's drier and lower in the post-peak base flows during July, August, and September. We need to protect the water quality through keeping water in the river, through shading the river, through just looking after the river so that it doesn't get too low, it doesn't get too dry, too warm, and there's oxygen in the river.
I'm Jill Bergman, and I'm an artist in Steamboat Springs. I am normally a printmaker, but right now I'm painting a very large mural that is about the Yampa River. It was commissioned by Friends of the Yampa. They're a nonprofit that supports the river, education and protection of the river. It's 850 square feet, and it will be on the ambulance building in downtown Steamboat Springs. I am painting the river because the Friends of the Yampa requested the entire Yampa River, which is 250 miles long. I was a little overwhelmed by this. I wanted to include the landscape, not just the river as you would see it on a map, but the actual landscape. So with the horizon line and mountains, forests, and then also the important elements of river usage, agricultural, industrial, recreational, and also the environmental elements of the river. This is really something that's important to me. Both of my parents are environmental scientists, and I grew up respecting the river, any river. I grew up in Laramie, Wyoming, and we came to Steamboat a lot when I was a kid. So this is a special place, and it's a special river. So I enjoy spending time along the river. I like to walk along the core trail and actually just sit on a bench and watch the river. I also have a 6-year-old, and she likes to throw rocks in the river. So we just spend kind of, I don't know, fun outside time by the river. I'm not a rafter anymore. I used to be when I grew up. I'm not really a fisher person. I think I just enjoy being outside. I like the sound of the river, the trees, and I like quiet. So that's my main appreciation of the river.
My name is Bill Atkinson. I'm an aquatic biologist, fisheries biologist. In the state, we refer to it in the Parks and Wildlife as our fisheries biologist as aquatic biologist. I've been an aquatic biologist for the state since 2003 in this area. I've worked for the state in fisheries research and management since 1998. In the Yampa River, I manage it to provide a sustainable fishery resource for anglers. At the same time, meeting the needs, managing within the needs of preserving, conserving, and enhancing native fish populations. We have, in the Yampa River system is connectivity from the upper Yampa River down all the way for the whole drainage, all the way down to the confluence of the Green River. And we have 4 federally listed endangered species in the lower basin, and we know based on prior studies that fish from the upper basin up here will migrate down to those lower reaches, and that could potentially impact the native species that we're focusing on for recovery that are currently listed under the Endangered Species Act. So we manage certain species to cut down threats to those native species, as well as the native species in the basin that are not currently listed on as a federal endangered species list, such as flannelmouth suckers, bluehead suckers, round-tailed chubs, and the state species of concern, we call them. And also in the Yampa Basin, we've seen significant declines in mountain whitefish, which are native in Colorado only to the Yampa River and the White River basins. And so what we manage in the sport fish with, like rainbow trout, brown trout, to primarily target the species of concern to anglers and tourists, and you also have non-native fish like northern pike. That's a significant threat from a predation standpoint, because northern pike are not native to this system, to this area, and so they are very predaceous. They are very predaceous fish, predatory fish, and so by having populations of pike being established in the system, it can have significant impacts on both sport fish and native species like mountain whitefish. So we have to balance the needs of recreational sport fish management with those of the native species.